Welcome to Career Choices. I'm your host, Elizabeth Gia. On this program, you'll meet accomplished people sharing their background, experience, and career path. Today's guest, Mr. James Douglas, is a teacher, coach, and mentor in Montgomery County. He has dedicated himself to the mission of giving students many opportunities to learn, play, and ultimately thrive. Mr. Douglas was a Montgomery County science teacher. He's organized numerous science fairs throughout his career. Meantime, he's a high school sports coach for several teams. He co-founded organizations dedicated to youth wrestling. Mr. Douglas has many awards. To name a few, Teacher of the Month from the National Football League, NFL. Distinguished Service to Public Education from Montgomery County Board of Education. And on 4 occasions, he's earned the Distinguished Teacher Award by the PTSA, Parent Teacher Student Association of Sherwood High School. Let's welcome Mr. James Douglas. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start from the beginning. You have a bachelor's degree in biology and started out teaching science. Tell us about how you decided upon this path.
I was a pre-med major and I found that it wasn't the right path for me. So about halfway through college, I changed my path. My senior year, I could have graduated a semester early, but I went back and I student taught. And then as the summer wore on, after I graduated, I still didn't know I was going to be a teacher. And then the day before school started, I got a phone call from the assistant principal at Northwood asking if I wanted to teach part-time the next Monday. And so I spent my first year at Northwood. I did the things that new teachers do to keep their jobs. I coached the baton twirlers. I taught things like auto body when they needed it.
Nice.
My second year, I was moved over to Whitman because the Northwood staff got smaller. I started part-time there, and then I spent 17 years there as a science teacher, but I taught other things, PE, taught a little German.
Nice.
I coached wrestling there, and I coached the Palms there, and I ended my time at Whitman as the athletic director.
Wonderful.
Moved over to Sherwood. My children were young. We live near Sherwood, so I changed over there as athletic director, and then spent the rest of my time after I left that job as a science department chair. And the last 10 years, I taught AP Bio there.
So let's talk about that, the science part. You coordinated many of these science fairs in the county and in the schools. So describe what your roles were when you were coordinating the science fairs.
So my entry into science fair at Sherwood was interesting because the principal came to me and said, you will have a science fair. Wow. And I decided that I should just do that instead of dump it on one of the other teachers. So the students, either in my 9th grade science class or my AP Bio class, did original science projects. Almost all of them were the ones that were the kinds you could do at home or at school. They weren't big internships. And so we would have a local science fair. That was a lot of fun. And then the kids would be encouraged, sometimes coerced, but mostly encouraged to go to the county science fair. At the county fair, I got more and more involved as I had more and more kids involved. I felt like I needed to give back. So some of the things I did for them over the years is I would sometimes set up the venue. Sometimes I'd handle the catering for the judges. Recently, I've been helping with the awards, and I've always served on the scientific review committee as the educator. We have some PhDs who read, and we make sure the projects are going to be safe and the kids can do them. The school fair, on the other hand, you're responsible for everything. Getting judges is one of the hardest things. You have to feed them, find awards.
Make them happy.
Yeah, set up the place. So one time a parent thanked me after a science fair for giving their child who wasn't an athlete an opportunity to compete in something other than sports. So that was a nice thing to hear about that.
Is there one or any standout science projects that you've come across?
So in the county fair, every year they send 4 projects to the International Science Fair. And I have had a couple of kids go, one at Whitman and then a couple projects from Sherwood. And that's a big deal because most of the projects that go are internship projects. So for a kid to win with something they did at home in the garage or in our lab at school is a big deal.
Awesome. So then let's move on to the next degree. You got your master's in phys ed. And then you passed the rigorous National Board Certification for Teachers, NBCT. Tell us about that certification. I understand it's very rigorous, and what impact does it have on teachers who pass it?
So it's a very self-reflective process. You are videotape teaching and you analyze what went on. You plan some lessons in units. There's 4 parts and there's 4 essay test that you take, and you have to score 275 out of 300.
Okay.
The adolescent science is the hardest one to achieve on. Took me 2 tries, and I just barely passed. But for me, I did it toward the end of my career, so it made me look back on the best practices I had used. For younger teachers, it's very self-reflective and helps them look forward. From the financial standpoint, at the time, it gave you a $5,000 bump in your take-home pay, and it also is one of the few things as a teacher that can add to your salary when they calculate your pension.
Okay. I see that's why you had this lapel here, this little...
That's my National Board certification pin. I'm proud of that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now let's explore the athletics part of your career. You've sponsored several high school teams, the wrestling, field hockey, Palms. What would you say is important about being that kind of a sports coach? Do you have to be good at motivating someone? Do you have to be a good athlete yourself?
So I wasn't a very good athlete, and I think that shaped my coaching because the fact that I always struggled, I cut a lot. I only got to play on teams mostly that anybody could be on. There were no cuts. It helped me have great empathy for the athlete or the kid that was on the team that wasn't a great athlete. They were struggling just to play the sport. I think it helped me when we tried to grow the wrestling program at Whitman in terms of numbers. Kids came out. To answer the first part of the question, you have to get kids to trust you and have confidence in you. The most important thing for a coach is the well-being of their athletes. And if the kid is willing to trust you and then you can motivate them to want to learn the sport, that's the most important thing. If you can motivate a student in the classroom or an athlete on a team to want to get better and to want to learn, I think that's the key. And I sometimes tell the parents on back to school night in AP Bio that I don't really teach AP Bio, I coach AP Bio. The kids have to learn it themselves. I was told one time that my teaching and coaching philosophy was about teaching success, not winning. That was an outside former wrestler and a current parent who wrote that one time. And when you're young in an interview, the principal asks you for your educational philosophy. And it's a really hard question when you're young. Now it's easy for me to say because somebody pointed out to me that if you teach kids to be successful in the fundamentals, they're going to be okay on the field, they're going to be okay in the classroom, they're going to be okay in their life.
That is very inspirational. Thank you. So then at Whitman High School, let's talk more about that. You did grow that wrestling team from 8 wrestlers to 80 wrestlers?
Well, 80 might be a stretch, but yes, we were to the point we had to practice on 3 mats. We got really big. I think the things I talked about were the kids had confidence. I always used to say that kids would run into the fire for me, like they had confidence in what we would do. One of my peers said that the most important thing I did for wrestling at Whitman, and this is his opinion, but I put the Whitman wrestling sweatshirts on all the cheerleaders, and they would come and cheer, and he felt that was a big marketing thing. I didn't realize it at the time.
Okay.
But I would do things like the morning after the matches, I'd have a big banner in the cafeteria where the kids could read about what their classmates had done. So I can't quantify what happened. I do know we went from losing 25 in a row, 2 of those were mine, to being a dominant team in the second half of the 80s in Montgomery County.
That is a really big success story, so kudos, thank you for doing that. I'm sure to this day, Whitman will have had that impact because of this.
Well, they still have a strong program, and the kids that I coached that are now in their 50s, we have a very good relationship all the time. We stay in touch. Got
it. So then, as you're looking back on your sports coach experience, you mentioned, some important factors about how to teach, how to motivate, how to inspire. Anything you could say to the people watching our show? If you want to become a good coach, what should they be doing? One of the keys is you have to build an appropriate relationship with the kid, and that word appropriate is important in today's world where you see examples of inappropriate relationships, but you have to build a relationship with every kid so that they feel that you understand them. Now that's in the classroom or on the team.
And so you have to build that personal relationship where they're confident in you and you understand their needs. One of the challenges in sports, and Vince Lombardi was very good at this, I'm a Lombardi disciple even though you wouldn't know it if you watch me coach, is that he had the ability to treat his athletes as individuals, work with their strengths and their weaknesses, know what they needed to be motivated and to do their job. And at the same time, they all felt they were being treated the same. And I think that's really important to be able to do that.
That's great. It sounds like you didn't just single out the most talented on the team, but it's important to also let everyone know on the team what they're good at and go from there.
So you have to be able to work with the most talented kids on the team in a very different way from the kids on the team that are struggling, and yet make them both think that nobody's being favored and everything is equal and fair. And so that is something Lombardi was very good at.
So then let's talk about, in terms of that philosophy to your young wrestlers. You co-founded this organization for young wrestlers, Viking Mat Club. Talk to me about that.
So there was a youth wrestling organization around in Potomac called Carteret Athletic Association, and they sort of went out of business. And so then we decided to start up a program for novice wrestlers in the down
What was
county
it
area.
called?
Well, that was the Viking Mat Club.
Okay, yes.
That was over 30 years ago, and it's grown to a program where we have 150 kids a year and 4 teams practicing at a couple different schools. So it's kept youth wrestling alive in down county, in the Bethesda area.
So I understand you also co-founded Montgomery Youth Wrestling League, but we'll explore that after the break. And I understand one of your participants in one of the clubs, she recently earned a gold medal in wrestling in the Olympics. So now it's time to take a break. But stay tuned, we'll have more with Mr. Douglas.
Every book is an adventure waiting to come to life. Visit new worlds. Encounter new friends. And discover the power of reading. Go to read.gov to read A Princess of Mars, the first novel to feature John Carter. A new world awaits. Read.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him winning both the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same year, 1 in 195 million. The odds of the child being diagnosed with autism, 1 in 110. I'm Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism.
Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
Today is Saturday.
Yeah. Salad on Saturday, fruit on Friday, throw a ball Thursday.
Water Wednesday, touch your toes Tuesday. Let's move Monday, swap us next Sunday.
60 minutes of physical activity a day and eating well can help get your child healthy. So keep them active and eating well every day. Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov. That's letsmove.gov.
Read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition.
Welcome back to Career Choices. In today's program, we've invited Mr. James Douglas to talk about his career as a teacher, coach, and mentor. Thanks for being here with us.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So, before the break, we were talking about the wrestling organizations. Talk to me about the wrestling organization that you co-founded.
Okay, so the Viking Mat Club, we're very proud of it. We're very inclusive. We have a lot of girls involved, and inclusive is the big word, and we really strive for retention. We want the kids to learn to love the sport. We look for 90% kids coming back the next year. That's a big deal.
Wow.
We do an interesting algorithm where we match kids up with kids of similar ability levels. So You don't always see a lot of pins when you come. Kids, our best kids are going to be 500 because they're going to wrestle the other good kids, not necessarily the weaker kids. So that makes it sort of unique among the novice wrestling leagues in the state.
So about these novice wrestlers, when things are really amazing, it seems like one of them ended up an Olympic gold medalist. Can you talk about that?
So in the Montgomery Youth Wrestling League, there's a team from Gaithersburg. It's coached by a guy named Bob Kristen, and he's sort of a leader in the adolescent girls and young women wrestling. And years ago, he started off with a girl named Helen Maroulis, who came up through his program, eventually wrestled in the league that's now the Montgomery Youth Wrestling League, went on to Magruder High School, went to wrestle in college in an area where there was women's wrestling, and eventually became, in the last Olympics, the first American woman to ever win a gold medal in freestyle.
Fantastic. What do you remember about her?
I remember her dedication and her focus at a time when girls wrestling it wasn't as accepted as it today. There were so many times she could have given it up, and she didn't. She was lucky she had a great high school coach who supported her, and so it's a great story that the whole wrestling community around here, it was really happy to see Helen and then Kyle Snyder from Good Counsel also win gold medals at the last Olympics.
Very good. So certainly your novice wrestling clubs touched lives that became now gold medalists, and that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And so now let's explore the little nuggets of wisdom when you're mentoring. How important is it to successfully connect with these young adults? And how hard is it sometimes to connect with them?
It can be a challenge sometimes. It goes back to that appropriate relationship things.
Okay.
Some of the things that you need to do to gain their confidence, you have to be careful about because sometimes they're frowned upon.
Okay.
Does that make sense? In other words, you have to make sure your contact is correct and where you see them, how you talk to them. But you have to gain their trust, and so that they're confident that you care about them. And I think the caring piece goes a long way to helping to motivate them to do the right thing. I've also always tried to set a good example in my behavior.
That's very good. When you say that, the mentoring and building trust with these young adults, are there like reoccurring common issues that you anticipate, having to perhaps overcome when you have to deal with young adults who are, navigating their life?
I think that the fact that young adults are always looking sort of, they look at adults as not having the right answers, even though we know we do have the answers because we've seen it before. So you do have to convince them that maybe you do know something. Don't roll your eyes at me or your parents, those type of things. Gain nothing by rolling your eyes at your parents. I say that to kids a lot of times.
That's very good. And it seems like throughout your career, being around, very impressionable people and upbeat people, you've also explored being an optimist. The National Capital Optimist Club is something that you've been involved in for 40 years. Can you explain what this club is and your role in it?
So optimism developed in the early 1900s, like a lot of civic organizations. They took on they worked as the friend of youth at the time, the friend of the delinquent boy when they started. The National Capital Optimist Club's been around since 1937. When I was in college, I worked as a laborer at their Christmas tree lot, and slowly over time, I've been president 4 times, and I run the Christmas tree fundraiser. Last year, it's fair to say we put $100,000 into youth and youth programs in the Washington area. Wow. Sometimes the members like to talk about how much money we've raised since I've done it. Their number's always a little high because in the beginning, the dollars made had the same impact that they do today, but in the beginning, $10,000 was a huge profit, and so today. So it's one of those things, when I look back on my life, that the wrestling team and the Optimist Club, aside my own children, those are probably the 2 things in my life that have had the biggest impact. When I think of my life's work, those are the 2 things.
This Optimist Club, it seems like it helps youth, and how are they involved? Do they come to the club, or?
So we have some programs where we have children come. We have an essay contest.
Okay.
We have a very big junior golf tournament over at Langston in Northeast Washington, where we have the kids come and play golf for a day and feed them, and they have a great time. And if they qualify, we'll sponsor them in the state tournaments, Maryland or Virginia. And if they qualify for the international tournament, we'll help them with their airfare and get them down to Florida. When those kids come back from Florida and talk about what the experience was, it just makes you realize all that hard work. But we support other programs, like big ones like Children's Hospital, and small ones like the Peppermill Youth Organization, which is just a youth football program in a really tough neighborhood where they don't have a lot of resources. So it's very rewarding. When we have awards night and the groups comes and the kids speak, it motivates you to go back and do it again the next year.
Yes, it seems like you've been part of that youth sports team environment all your career. So I see on your resume that you juggle coaching the sports teams, and then you coordinate events, and of course you perform your duties as a teacher all at the same time. So what are some tips you can give us about managing your time successfully?
So I find myself, people will tell me that I'm very organized, and I believe in that. I'm a problem solver. That's important when you're trying to keep things in the air. I'm a multitasker. But I also think planning and preparation is so critical for all those things. When I was supervising young coaches as an athletic director, sometimes I'd watch a practice and it didn't look like it was effective, or the parents or the kids. And when I'd say to the coach, I'm like, did you have a practice plan like you'd have a lesson plan? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, yes, when you plan a practice, you have to plan it just like a lesson. You have to have objectives. How are you going to reach them? How are you going to measure that you got there? So I like to say that as a coach and a teacher, we never fail as a team or as a class because I didn't put in the prep time.
Because you certainly did prep and plan for each practice or class.
Right.
Wonderful.
So I think my preparation has always been good. My organization skills have been good.
So for people coming into the teaching field, planning, prepping, that's very important. Any other really important experiences that helped you along the way to become a better teacher or coach?
I think coaching helped me become a better teacher.
Okay.
It's interesting, young teachers are really, really busy, and sometimes their administrators encourage them to not take on too much, but I always encourage them as soon as they can to get into an extracurricular position, whether it's coaching, a sport, or some other group, because you meet the kids in a different way. You realize that what you do in the classroom is not the only part of the career. And most people who do that, they teach a while and then they start to coach or do something. After a while, they'll actually get to the point that the coaching is the reason that they're teaching.
Wonderful. It seems like then there is a win-win situation there.
I think so. I think so. But it's hard in the beginning when you're really busy as a new teacher.
That's right. I mean, there's a lot on the plate. So what about some valuable lessons you can share with us throughout your career?
Well, I think learning to reach every kid in the classroom is a big thing. When I started to tutor late in my career, I found I couldn't cheat. Like, in other words, in the classroom, you can always say to the kid, hey, look it up, or today, look on your phone. But when you're tutoring a child, you really have to understand the material. So in the last 5 years as I've tutored, my knowledge of my craft has gone way up.
Okay.
I'm kind of like Tom Brady now. I know everything, but I'm getting older and I can't run like I used to. But
okay. So I understand you have some field hockey students who you're, going to go and see later today. So what would they say about you?
Oh, there's a good one. I think they would say that I'm fair. That I challenge them and I don't push them. As a coach, I've always described myself as a leader, not a pusher. And sometimes it's a challenge if you are an assistant coach for a pusher, which I've done a couple times, and then you take practice one day and the kids have to adjust to the fact that you lead. Field hockey, like Poms and majorettes, are the kind of thing where obviously I didn't play the sport, and I want there's a long, hairy trail to how we got into those coaching things. But if the key to coaching and teaching is motivating your kids to want to learn and get better, then you don't have to necessarily play the sport to be successful. You have to be a student of the sport. Obviously, you have to continue to get better and learn the sport, but the kids want to learn it and get better. They'll figure out some way, even if you don't know everything you need to know about the sport in the beginning. I'm a much better wrestler today than I was when I wrestled in middle school and high school, because as I went along, I would teach things, and you have to know how to do it to teach it a little bit. So.
Wonderful. So we have a few more moments. So briefly, before we leave, would you impart to us some of your words of wisdom about, these novice people trying to break into the teaching career and how to sustain themselves and not burn out?
So one thing I tell young teachers, either in college or they're out of college and they're thinking about going back, is that having taught both public and private, and then my kids go to private school, public school teachers will tell young teachers that they should ignore the private school world because there's not as much money. And there's not usually, but it's a totally different quality of life. It's comparing apples and oranges. So when you start thinking about being a teacher, open up as many different pathways you can to being a teacher. Don't narrow yourself in. And get involved in that extracurricular world, because that will actually help you avoid the burnout, because you're going to see kids in a different environment than just in the classroom every day.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure to be here.
So now, Mr. Douglas, thank you for sharing all your experience and stories with us. And this ends our program for today. We appreciate our guest, Mr. James Douglas, for sharing all his stories and accomplishments. And thank you for joining us. Hope Mr. Douglas's stories inspire you to explore different career choices and make an impact in our community. And if you have any feedback or comments, or if you would like to share your experience, please email us at qip.career.choices@gmail.com. We'll see you next time on Career Choices.